Well, hello, everyone. I'm John Sullivan with the Sullivan and Sullivan real estate team at Keller Williams. Our real estate practice specializes in working with aging adults, people over 55, or also known as seniors, and we're also known as senior downsizing experts. We published a book called The Ultimate Guide to Downsizing in 2018, and as you might imagine, we have to surround ourselves with experts in all the services that we want to provide our clients. And so we have some wonderful partners who are also passionate about working with aging adults as we are. And I have two of those folks with us today, our partners with the Davidson Law Firm, and that's Matt and James Davidson. They specialize in elder law or estate law, and they work with things like wills, trust, powers of attorney, among other things. So how are you guys doing today?
Great. It's good to be here.
Doing well, John. Thank
you. Good. Okay. So your names are on the screen, but introduce yourself so we know when people watch this, they know who's Matt and who's James.
Sure. So my name is James Davidson. My brother Matt and I, we are the principal and founding attorneys of Davidson Law Group. And so in case you're wondering, yes, Matt's my older brother. and as you suggested, John, we are passionate about our practice, and what we do is help, in particular with this arena here. We help our clients and seniors and the children of aging parents with their estate matters, and help them not only with their planning for any period of disability and appointing and empowering folks to make decisions for them during that period of incapacity, but also in situating their estate and ensuring that among other things, their assets are protected as they age and their medical bills increase and they face the possibility of some potential long-term care stay. We help provide protection plans and provide for alternative sources of paying for that long-term care or that medical care as they age.
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt, if you want.
Yeah, I was just going to say absolutely. You know, I'm Matt. I'm the older brother. We run the firm together. We love working with John and Ingrid because a lot of times they're helping a client downsize. A lot of times that's because that person is going into an assisted living or retirement community or something like that. So then they fall directly into, our clientele. So I appreciate the relationship between Davidson Law Group and senior downsizing experts.
Yeah, as you pointed out, it's not just, it's about families, and many times the children are involved in that. And that's the same when we work with our clients. Many times the children are involved helping their parents with the process of downsizing. So how long have you all been practicing law?
Yeah, so almost a decade now. James and I both went to law school together. And we both worked for some boutique firms when we first got out of law school, but we knew pretty quickly that we wanted to start our own firm. We knew that there was a certain culture that we wanted to establish and a certain type of firm that we wanted to have. And so, we do exclusively estate planning, elder law, and probate, and have been doing all of that, like I said, for almost a decade now.
Yeah. So, what made you choose estate or elder law?
Sure, and if you've been to any of the events that we've spoken at, you may have heard this story. But really, it's a personal story, and it relates back to our maternal grandfather. We called him Granddad. And he was a World War II veteran and fought in the Pacific on a lot of the major island battles there in World War II. And after the war, he came back to the U.S., went to college, got married to my grandmother, and worked for International Harvester, his entire career, and then retired, and from there moved to Austin, where he settled down as a retiree. And like any good retiree or responsible retiree, my grandfather and my grandmother got their their estate planning done. What they did was wills and powers of attorney, which are great things to do. But what they didn't anticipate would be the several battles with cancer, and what ended up being for my grandfather about 8 years in a nursing home. And what they had retired with, which was a very, very modest, but what we'd consider a very good estate, or to retire with, ended up down to nothing, right? And so by the time my grandfather died, they really had nothing. And at this point, my grandmother's still alive, and she's 98 years old at a nice nursing home in Fort Worth, and my mother and her siblings are having to pay out of pocket every month to pay for her care so that she doesn't have to go on Medicaid. And we saw kind of the struggle that my mom went through as the primary caregiver for my grandparents. And we weren't attorneys at the time, and we obviously would have been able to do something had we been, but we learned from that experience and took that personally. And Matt and I have kind of charged ourselves that if we have an opportunity to prevent that scenario from happening to other families, then we're certainly going to prevent it. And that's what we've done, is we've focused our firm on really helping families who are in that particular type of struggle to provide good answers and solutions for those problems while they're in the trenches.
Yeah, that's good. And my story is similar. The reason we focused taking our real estate practice into helping aging adults was because my mom, she was ready, and we finally, between my brother and I and her doctor, convinced her she needed to move to a safer place, and one that she could get meals and, just independent living, but she was living alone and had some health challenges. And just the process of fixing up an aging house and getting it sold and what to do with the stuff and the whole process, that's when we decided to start doing everything we could to make the process easier and teaching people about how to prepare for it. So, everybody's heard of a will, and, that's a starting place that many people plan, though there are those that don't have wills. My dad, I guess, had a holographic or a handwritten will that the neighbor across the street witnessed, and he died 30 years before my mom died. And I remember I was living out of state and having the probate process and things like that, and what a challenge. But, tell us a little bit more about wills, why somebody should have one, and is it a good idea to write your own or download one and fill in the blanks online? People say they do that. So just maybe kick around a little bit about wills and what they're intended to do and the probate process, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a will is the baseline document that one needs to have to dictate where their assets are going to go after they pass. I say the baseline because I'm sure that in a second we'll talk about other things on top of that we recommend. But if somebody dies without a will, oftentimes their things go not where they thought they would go, right? There's an assumption a lot of times that everything goes to a spouse, which is not always true. Or there's an assumption that if they're unmarried, that everything goes to the kids, which is not always true. There's certain laws in place that dictate where things go, and they're not always friendly to certain situations, and they certainly aren't what some people think they are. The biggest one that we see where people pass away without a will are blended families, right? Blended families, it's an absolute nightmare for the family if somebody in a blended family passes without a will, because technically in Texas, a lot of the assets go to the children in a blended family and not to the spouse. When if the person who passed away had their way, then they probably would have left everything to the spouse. So that's a major situation. If there's estranged children, if there's minor children, right? Those are all situations where if there's not a will in place, it can be an absolute nightmare. And oftentimes you ask about, you said about your dad, that's interesting about the holographic will, and You ask about, you know, the ones you can print offline. Oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes when people write their own or print one offline and fill in the blank, they cause more trouble than if they just hadn't even had a will at all.
Yeah.
There's certain provisions that have to be in there. And if they're not in there, according to Texas law, then there's all kinds of hoops that we have to jump through. And sometimes there are more hoops than there would have been if they just died without a will. So we definitely recommend, you know, always consulting an attorney whenever you're doing a will. And we definitely recommend that everyone have one, especially minor children, blended families, estranged children, etc.
Yeah, I have friends that I grew up with that, yeah, you know, like the mom died and the dad remarried or whatever, and there's other children involved, and
Yep.
frankly, they got shafted in
Yep.
the deal and those kind of things, and
Exactly.
that's unfortunate. And you know, that's one thing we preach to our clients in the seminars we do. It's all about planning, and I can tell you, just because of personal experiences and things like that, with family members, I don't want my son and people to have to go through that. If it makes sense to get that done up front.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we run across instances that there was a will, but it was never probated, and then somebody goes to sell their house and the deed wasn't changed, and so there's challenges. James, does a will have to be probated, or is there other things they can do in lieu of it?
Yeah. So, you know, it's a great question. And, you know, my answer is the typical lawyer answer. It just depends, right? So, you know, a lot of times in a situation where there is a will and maybe perhaps the only asset that we're dealing with is a piece of real estate, right? So maybe the primary residence, and but depending on the circumstances, a lot of times, if there is a will and you know, it's passing everything from husband to wife, then you can, without having to go through the formal probate process, and there are caveats here, obviously, there's certain qualifications that must be met, but generally speaking, there's a lot of times you can do abbreviated forms of probate, like an affidavit of heirship, which is a recognized method of transferring real estate interest from a deceased person to a spouse or to children or to what would be considered their heirs if there's not a will. So there are some abbreviated forms of probate that you can utilize on real property to pass interest to beneficiaries. Or if you plan ahead, you know, there are some cheap and easy ways to avoid any probate process altogether. And that's the use of either transfer on death deeds or what are called ladybird deeds, which are really it's considered a special warranty deed reserving a life estate. And so there's some really simple, cheap and easy things that you can do on real property to avoid the probate process altogether and bypass the will. And also using a ladybird deed, add some additional protection on the property from liens, from medical creditors, or maybe the deceased person, you know, were applied and qualified and received benefits from Medicaid. And so there's some cheap and easy things that you can do to ensure that these real property assets go to your beneficiaries the way that you intend and provide some added layers of creditor protection. So to answer your question, John, you don't always have to probate a will. And oftentimes there's better solutions than a will for passing assets to beneficiaries.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, I was thinking about the heirship affidavit, and you brought up some other good points like ladybird deeds and other options, and that's right. And I'm more familiar with the heirship. Well, also ladybird, I've seen that happen in some of our things as well, but it saved people the probate process, and those were good options for them. So what about a trust? I mean, if somebody has a will, do they need a trust? Why do people create trust?
Well, there's a lot of different types of trusts that have a lot of different purposes, but there is one certain type of trust that's the most common, which is a revocable living trust. And a revocable living trust is a document that does allow the assets to pass to the beneficiaries without going through probate. If properly executed and funded, then that trust effectively avoids probate. But also with a trust like that, you can do all kinds of highly customized sections of how the kids receive assets, right? Giving certain behavioral incentives, managing the assets for minor children or for children who aren't very good with money. Protecting assets if one spouse dies and the other one gets remarried, making sure the kids don't get disinherited. There's all kinds of functionality with a revocable living trust that we do besides just avoiding the probate process, but it is a very effective way of avoiding probate.
Yeah, and trust, a lot of times, as you said, the story you started with about your grandfather, had a trust been created, it could have protected a lot of their assets in a way that, well, it's just the best way to protect those and keep them from people taking those things and leaving something legacy for the family or protecting them for long-term reasons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's actually another common type of trust that we do here, which are trusts to assist people in protecting their assets from creditors or from medical situations, from long-term care, helping people qualify for government benefits either from the VA or from Medicaid, and still being able to have some money in that trust, right? Normally you think of you have to go broke before you get any government assistance, but trusts like that can assist them in protecting those assets, not only from creditors, but also being able to still have a little bit of money and get government benefits. So I'm glad you asked about that one, because that is another very common type of trust that we do.
Right. So, one of the other things that we talk about and recommend for people are powers of attorney. And I know my brother and I, that was a big deal when we 4 or 5 years ago updated her will and powers of attorney, and there's several different kinds of power of attorney. And again, that's another thing that people say, oh, I can just download a durable power of attorney, check the boxes and things. And you're rolling the dice has been my experience with those, because financial institutions may not accept it. I've seen challenges when people are trying to sell property when it wasn't done. So, I guess tell us about the different type of power of attorneys and what you would recommend to, most, well, you don't have to be an aging adult. It's really a good idea if you're married and have children or whatever to cover things when needed. So, what kind of powers of attorney would you just recommend for a family to have?
And you bring up a good point, John. And so often the incapacity part of the planning is the one that's most often overlooked. Everybody knows that you need something to determine where your assets go when you pass, but they don't think about, well, what happens to things when I'm incapacitated, and that's what in part what the powers of attorney do. And so you're really in the state of Texas, there's 2 major types of powers of attorney. One is what's called a durable power of attorney, and that durable power of attorney appoints and empowers individuals or institutions to make financial and estate decisions either during a period of incapacity or at a point in time where you just simply don't want to make these decisions anymore. And so that durable power of attorney is really important when it comes to handling estate matters during that period of incapacity. And as you suggested, not all powers of attorney are created equal. And so these are, the powers of attorney, especially the durable, you're going to want a qualified attorney who knows what they're doing to draft this type of power of attorney, because there's certain powers that you want to include in the power of attorney that a generic one, or one that you might pick up at a office supply store might not include. And that's including gifting and asset protection planning, trust planning, and benefits qualification planning, dealing with VA, dealing with Medicaid. And so there's these powers that are really important to be included in there, and oftentimes have to be intentionally included. And so that durable power of attorney is a very powerful and useful tool that that really a qualified attorney should be drafting for you. And then the other one is a medical power of attorney. And the medical power of attorney, like the durable, appoints and empowers an individual to make medical decisions for you when you're not able to make them for yourself. So for whatever the reason, if you can't make medical decisions for yourself, then your appointed agent will make the medical decisions for you. You know, in these powers of attorney, there's room to give special instructions and kind of lay out your wishes in terms of courses of treatment that you want or don't want. And so it's really important that you plan ahead and you get these powers of attorney created and by somebody who knows what they're doing, and get them in place. And just because a lot of times it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of if they're, or excuse me, it's not a matter of if they're needed, it's a matter of when they're needed. So
Right.
yeah, and so you got to get them in place because you never know when that crisis is going to occur.
Absolutely. So if somebody had a power of attorney created in another state, or should powers of attorney be reviewed on a regular basis? I mean, you know, what is the deal with that? Or is a power of attorney good for forever?
Yeah, so powers of attorney are creatures of statute, meaning that the legislature determines what the laws are going to be surrounding powers of attorney, and then they, you know, they're put in the estates code. And so just like any law, they change from time to time. So there was a recent change in the durable power of attorney relating to cryptocurrency and the content of electronic communication. And so these powers of attorney, they change, the laws change on them from time to time. And so for that reason, it's important to make sure that they're updated. And another reason is that institutions, whether it's a bank or you know, a title company or a hospital, these institutions are not required by law to accept them. And they tend to err on the side of caution. If there's any question about the validity or whether or not that the person who signed this power of attorney, if that's still their intent, or if there's anything kind of goofy about the way that it's signed or whatever, they don't have to accept it. So you want to make sure that everything is done properly and done properly the first time, so that when it comes time to use it, you don't run into any issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that before, is that power of attorney is too old, especially financial institutions are very leery about accepting those. This is almost sounds like a joke or something, but I want to bring it up because I've had a couple people believe that they still had power of attorney over somebody's estate after that person deceased. Do you ever hear that too? People say, well, I have a power of attorney for my mom, but your mom has passed away, so that doesn't give you the rights to deal with her estate after that, just because you had a power of attorney before the person passed.
The way that I explain it to clients is that your power of attorney dies when you die.
Right.
Yeah, you're exactly right, John.
But yeah, I mean, I can see how people kind of think that, but it's I've run into that situation a couple of times.
A very common conception.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about trust and wills and powers of attorney, and I just thinking that we recommend to our clients, it's so important to get together with an attorney that specializes in estates and those documents, and put something together, especially, you know, if you're a single person and things like that, even that would be important on medical and durable powers of attorney, somebody. But certainly if you have a family, it's very important, and to have them reviewed every once in a while too, because things change. And that was another thing about trust. You know, you create a trust, you know, if your assets change or real property, the trust has to be adjusted for that, correct?
Yeah, you have to, you know, get those new assets into the trust. You know, if you're selling one home and buying another one, you gotta get the first one sold and out, and then get the new one bought and in. And you know, one of the biggest changes that we have to make is when new laws pass, right? You know, we have the 2018 tax law change that changed all kinds of stuff. And then the Secure Act last year changed the way that retirement plans are treated. So that's one of the big changes that we have to change in trust, for sure.
Yeah. So what would you like to add that I haven't asked you about planning for your future and things that people should consider to protect their families and their estates?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So when people work with us, it's typically because they really care about legacy, and they really care about setting up their family for success, and they really care about making things as easy as possible for their family when these tragedy situations occur, or just when life changes occur. And so, you know, that's what we really love to do, is just help people set up a plan that they can be proud of, that they are really setting up a heritage and a legacy for their family. And then another misconception that I just want to hit real fast is that a lot of people think it's, you do it once and you tuck it away and you never have to look at it again. But at our firm, we've developed what we call the lifetime planning process. And this basically covers, you know, you need certain things whenever you're newly married and have young children, and you're trying to build wealth and set them up in that scenario. You need kind of a different plan as you accumulate wealth, and then it changes a little bit when you retire, and then it certainly changes whenever you get to the age where you're starting to think about long-term care. And so we just encourage our clients to keep that relationship with an estate planning attorney so that they can cover the full lifetime planning process and make sure that the legacy is the way that they want to leave it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I said you're elder law attorneys, which is a common phrase, but really families should start thinking about it at a much earlier age, especially whether or not you have children, even a married couple and things.
Well, it's funny because in some situations, it's actually more important for the young family to have documents in place if they have a spouse and young children than it even is sometimes for elderly people.
Right.
So that's an interesting.
That's a good point. Well, and none of us know when it's going to happen.
Right. Yep,
So
exactly.
it's too late after it already happened. And that's, you know, my wife Ingrid and I got very serious because of we're trying to teach people about it, and we had to look at our own selves, and whether it be planning with a trust or will, but what we call pre-need planning. You know, what's going to happen when you do die? Does your family have to take on that burden, or if you've pre-created a plan and let people know what you want to happen, I can tell you from personal experiences, it saves a lot of grief, and if you have a family with children, it's a great gift to give them, for sure.
And the only thing I would add, John, is that, and Matt hit the nail on the head, we see it as our job to give families the relevant information that they need to make informed decisions for their family, because every family situation is different. Not one plan is the same. And so it's about understanding what your options are and making a good informed decision based on the options that are presented to you. Because oftentimes people are just afraid to even have that conversation with an attorney to even know what their options are. And so it's all about informing yourself and empowering yourself with making good, sound decisions so that your family and your loved ones are protected, and that you have a plan in place that is well thought out, and that when the time comes, it can be well executed.
Right. I think that's right. Well, and I know I just loved working with you guys to create ours, and I just tell everybody you have a great process, and ask all the questions that you need to know so you can put together the best plan that fits the family. And that's important. And that's something you're not going to get online. And even some of these ones that run you through a series of questions, there's no way that they can put something together that really does what you're trying to do with the documents anyway. And so it's a worthwhile investment, that's for sure. And I was just so happy that we connected when we did, and have a great working relationship. And like I said, we trusted you guys to take care of our things, and I would tell everybody, start planning. And if you've already planned and haven't looked at it for a while, you may want to review it. So I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to do this today. And for everybody that watches this video later, we'll have a way to contact the Davidson Law Firm, so you can go to them. And let me ask you, I mean, can people come in and just have a consultation with you and kind of learn what you suggest for them, or tell us how that works?
Yeah, we do a free in-person hour-and-a-half consultation. So even if you just want us to take a look at your docs and tell us what, tell you what we recommend, or whether you want to start from scratch, we definitely have that first meeting for free.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, find out what you need. It doesn't cost you anything to find out, and get some recommendations, and then you can go from there. But it's very important. Well, you guys, thanks so much. And I look forward to continuing to work together in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. We appreciate you guys.